Welcome back here at Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about Lukashenko and Belarus. The traditional Goldbergian principle is that if any obscure nation and its leader all of a sudden enters mainstream news, and you've got middle-class white chicks doing TikToks and Instagram posts about independence here, free that, human rights, it's probably not entirely organic. There is some broader economic motivation, more Western capitalism, liberal democracy. You get the picture. Now, this is not going to be a pro or anti-Lukashenko video. It's just attempting to give context because you have all these self-anointed experts that come out of the woodwork. They've never heard of Belarus, but because the AP told them to pay attention, now it's like the last dictator of Europe, which begs an important question. Is Belarus even Europe? Is Europe not just Western Asia? Are they the same continent? Is the Middle East even a thing? There's a lot of different queries you could put there. Is Europe just Northern Africa, like Northern African? Whatever. But anyway, Belarus, White Russian. Detailing the history is complicated because getting any good sources on Russian history in general is an issue. But you had the Russian Empire, you had the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Kievan Rus, so these territories have changed hands a decent amount, but there are still claims you have a distinct Belarusian people. And since 2000, you've had the Union State with Russia, which makes many people believe, oh, it's just a puppet state. But recently, Lukashenko has been trying to distance himself from Putin and say, no, we're going to use the Belarusian language, we have our own identity and culture. But as far as the man himself, he was an executive at a state farm, and when the Soviet Union collapsed, he became president and has since shown a reticence to leave office, which is one of the main reasons why people don't like him, amongst other things, especially the economic policies. But yeah, if he isn't necessarily wanting a restoration of the Soviet Union, he definitely has that Soviet-esque mentality towards culture and the economy. What was that great song? So that sort of approach, which in one sense you have to appreciate it if you're attempting to understand what's going on in Belarus today. And this is just a good black pill image right here. I could kind of show you the motivations of various people. I did want to note, going back to the Goldbergian principle, when we talk about economic influence, you can even look at in the Ukraine, right? The Ukraine is weak, but the point is that Euromaidan, people made this big deal, but it was really just a struggle over economic power, fundamentally. No, Yanukovych is not a great guy, but they say he's worth $12 billion. He was one oligarch. Timoshenko is another oligarch. And this guy on the far right, Mr. OG Chocolate, he was another oligarch. So it's not as though you really have, oh yeah, this is the right way. You might have a little bit more freedom of expression under the Euromaidan crowd, but ultimately it's about who controls the government and who controls the money. That's what it comes down to. Speaking of which, Belarus is not that bad off economically, believe it or not. They said under the CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States, it was one of the most prosperous. It has a very strong manufacturing base, in part because of government controls. Now, economic growth this year is about 2%. It's not that fantastic. I did see something that was really interesting, actually a couple of points. And that is, this is the United States debt to GDP, 129%, okay? When we go to Belarus, 39%. Give some context, Italy is 134%. I find this fascinating because if you ask the average neoconservative capitalism person, they would say, see, all these, Soviet-esque states, socialists, they're all in debt, collapsing. It's like, well, the United States has a worse debt to GDP ratio than little Belarus, which is, more socialist, arguably, than the United States, at least as far as having government-run companies. And if you look at the Gini coefficient, this is actually really fascinating. Belarus is less unequal than the United States. No, it's socialism. Less unequal than the United States. Although the United States is superior when it comes to the Human Development Index, so that's something. But I just was really fascinated by that little tidbit there that is socialist country, state-run farms, state-run forestry in many respects, they actually have better outcomes in terms of economic inequality than the United States. And this is a big thing. So he's maintained a lot of those, I think they're called cocals, but they're the state-run agriculture and other industries. And he's actually been essentially prohibiting certain people from leaving those industries. So that also results in a certain level of stability and security. So I think their manufacturing is like 34, 35% of the economy. So it's a stability, but of course you don't have as much economic freedom, I suppose. So I can just move over here. That doesn't mean there is no private investment or capital in Belarus. It's just more restrictive. So it's like we're going to maintain our national identity, or we're not going to move too far away from the old Soviet model because that's who we are, that's what we want to be. You can rest assured that if someone else came in power very rapidly, you would see really a diversion from that. And I'm probably going to be doing a video on this subject because it's almost like this socialism is inevitable unless you want that economic Darwinism. Let's just assume that the predictions about automation are correct, which I think they're a little bit exaggerated, but let's say they're correct. You always hear people say capitalism eliminates poverty, it improves health outcomes, which is true in one aspect. But if this automation happens and you're like, oh yeah, we're helping poor people by making them not have jobs anymore. So it may end up being the case, as I've already alluded to, with the expansion of the federal government and state governments into the economy, we're just going to have to guarantee more jobs using public money in order to prevent people from basically starving. The only alternative is, oh yeah, we can give you $1,000 a month, our little freedom dividend, as though that's going to actually not create massive inequality and ultimately just inflation as far as like price inflation, because everyone would have the same amount of money, as opposed to you have a job where you get raises or promotions over time. So that's just something, I'll probably do a video on it in any case. Now, you might have remembered last year there was all this outrage because this very strong woman, she stood up for the right of women to fry bacon and eggs on their foreheads, and there was outrage because they said she's the president of Belarus, and then I think she ran away from the country, as a very strong and empowered woman would do. But yeah, she's made criticisms. One thing you'll see, this is also the case with Russia, very corrupt judicial system. Very easy to get harsh sentences or actually be put to death. Democracy is not really in existence. You don't have free elections. You don't have much press freedom. So there's going to be trade-offs. But overall, that's going to be Belarus for you, the ex-Soviet model. The economy actually isn't doing that badly, although you have a lot of state control, and you're certainly not going to have the same social or economic freedoms in other respects. So it really becomes a trade-off of what you want to live under. But that's my view of Belarus. I don't see it as a fantastic, shining example, but in one sense, if you control the West, that is kind of fun. But obviously there are people who suffer based upon the outcomes of that system. So, what can you do?